Hello, everyone, and welcome to World Model UN Day 2022. My name is Philippe Lefebvre. I'm the director of World Model UN Day, and I'm very happy to bring you to our second edition, celebrating both what Model United Nations does in promoting the values of the UN and bringing youth together across the world and across every continent possible. This year's theme is Mothers Across Border, and for that, we're working with many excellent partners, and very happy today to be with my Deputy Director, Mariam Nassif, and the Secretary General of the World Federation of United Nations Associations, Bonian Golmohammadi, to talk a little bit about the role of civil society organizations in our opening ceremony. The World Federation of United Nations Associations, founded in 1946, is one of the largest associations promoting UN values and working with over 100 United Nations associations across the world. And in that, heading up as Secretary General is Bonian Golmohammadi, who was elected in 2009 to lead the organization and has overseen a huge growth in the organization with new offices in Korea, Belgium, India, and partnerships across the world. Before this, he was served as Secretary General of the United Nations Association in Sweden for 8 years, where he also oversaw a big expansion in its work and partnerships. So with lots of experience in civil society organizations, the work of the UN, the values of the UN, we could not be happier to speak to him today. And with that, we want to go straight into the discussion with him with a reflection on what do you believe is the current state of affairs of civil society relationships with the UN, and how do you see the future of this relationship developing? Thank you very much for joining us. Over to you, Mr. Golmohammadi.
Great to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Well, the state of civil society and the UN, it's a bit complicated. I think the pandemic has shown some of the weaknesses, and we see that the access to the UN has deteriorated. Some member states are unfortunately happy about that, and others have tried to facilitate better access. But I think that over the last couple of years, things certainly have not improved. And I think that's why it's a great idea that we all now try to build back better after the pandemic, especially when it comes to civil society and its relations with the US and the member states there. I mean, there are many things that could and should be done. I don't know if there's any specific aspect you would like to discuss.
Perhaps, sorry, Mariam, over to you.
Yeah, I'd just like to kind of carry on from when you said we'd like to build back better. And usually when we talk about the concept and notion of building, we usually tie that to youth. And so how do you see the future of youth and civil societies and their engagement at the UN tying into building back better?
Yeah, I mean, youth, as you know, are an incredible, both important, but also very dynamic and active group within our federation and the many UNAs and youth associations that we have around the world. And what we've seen, if we look at before the pandemic, for instance, as an example, the youth delegate program, where member states bring in youth representatives to the General Assembly. I think we have been very active in that area and tried to improve things. Many member states bring in youth as part of their delegations, a little bit of token representatives. You know, they're there for maybe a week, sometimes two, in rare cases longer. But I think we have tried to argue for that youth should be represented throughout the year in the different various large meetings and possible spaces where youth could be. So youth delegates, for instance, could participate from the ECOSOC Youth Forum to the high-level political forum to the General Assembly and at various other meetings as well, CSW, that will be coming very shortly. So I think one thing where youth could have better access to the UN is for member states to take youth more seriously and integrate them into the work that they're doing at the UN. So that's one thing. Another thing that we have worked on, of course, and which is the theme of this day is Model UN. And I mean, we think that Model UN is one of the best gateways to the UN system. So we collaborate with both member states, but we want to have the UN more actively involved as well, and not only one department of the UN, but you know, in different departments, different UN entities, different UN organs. And I think that's another thing that certainly could be improved. So there are many different ways of doing it, for sure.
It's great you talk about the UN youth delegates. We'll be talking to some later. In fact, it's a nice tie into some of the other things we do here. And maybe looking a bit more at sort of your experience, you've obviously been heading the WFUNA for over a decade now. What has been some of the hardest challenges you've faced when it comes to engaging new partners worldwide? Because we can talk very easily about this, but you've got experience, of course, with projects in China, Georgia, Uganda. And what are some of the difficulties you faced, and how would you recommend to overcome them?
I think one challenge, I mean, depends a little bit which actor we talk about or which partner, but I think one general challenge is that there is a lot of skepticism and reluctance to collaborate with civil society. We have seen this in different ways, obviously not from all member states and not all UN organs, etc., but from a significant number. And I think this is a challenge that also our national UN associations, youth associations have in different parts of the world. There is a fear that civil society is only there to criticize them, to find fault with them, to try to name and shame them. And I think that that's certainly one important element of civil society, to be watchdogs and to see what can be improved and criticize things that are not going well. But I think another aspect, which I think is equally important, is that civil society can be a great collaborator. It's not only an important stakeholder, obviously, but I think that civil society can contribute to different things. And I think that this is one aspect that we have tried to develop together with member states. For instance, when it comes to reporting on the progress of the Sustainable Development Goals, the VNR process, for instance, or in the Human Rights Council, where a number of our UNAs are very active in shadow reporting in a constructive fashion, sometimes even in collaboration with a member state that is being scrutinized. So I think that there are this skepticism of collaborating with civil society and youth, of course, especially as well, is something that I think we need to collectively try to work on and remedy in different ways. So this is one aspect that is challenging. Another aspect that many of our UNAs and many of our youth projects and youth members have a problem with is funding. Obviously. And I mean, I think this funding component is something also that we need to discuss with the member states in particular and different foundations to see how we can increase funding for the different projects and activities that we're doing. And I think this is going in the right direction. I think we've seen in the past 4 or 5 years that there's a greater interest in funding youth and youth projects, and this is excellent, but it's far from sufficient. So these are a couple of examples.
Thank you very much. Indeed, I think funding is something that quite overwhelming for many youth. And I mean, are there any examples of what the WFUNA does and some of the projects they do to expand out to youth and civil society organizations you can highlight for us?
Yeah, I mean, we have a number of different things that we're doing. We do have our own internal WFUNA Youth Advisory Council and the WFUNA Youth Network. I recommend everyone to try to connect to that. The WFUNA Youth Network is on Facebook and Twitter, so you can find us there easily. So they're a great help to see what we can do in terms of, and they are representing different regions. So I think this is one thing to be able to reach out to stakeholders globally. We have lots of trainings, obviously, youth trainings. We have general trainings on the UN, which you can also find on our website and Facebook. But we also have some more specific things, like, for instance, we have a Human Rights in Action program where youth come from different parts of the world. They get information and knowledge on human rights issues, but then they also get training in project management. They develop a project while they are with us, and then they go home and we help them monitor and while they implement those projects in their respective countries. And of course, our Model UN program, WFUNA International Model UN Wyman is very, very big for us and important. And, we've had very big gatherings. And I think maybe one of the most diverse Model UNs out there. We've had representatives from over 100 countries, and that's great. And I mean, I think, as I mentioned before, it's a great gateway, but also a way to learn more about the UN and develop skills. So I think that these are some of the youth things we do. And then we integrate youth in in all our regular programs. It's not always best to have just separate youth programs. We have youth in many of our different other activities. We have an entrepreneurship program where we try to help startups relate their business to the SDGs, and especially youth are participating in that. It's young owners and developers of businesses who try to make also a positive social impact, and the vast majority of them are young people. We've done that in Korea, we've done that in Congo, we're doing it elsewhere. So I think there are different ways to engage youth and involve them both in the programs you do and also in the decision-making processes of the organization.
Mm-hmm. I can confirm MUN is not just a gateway, almost a gateway drug, I would say, to really getting involved in the UN, sort of the international items. You mentioned a bit about private businesses there, and of course you have a background in consultancy and private business too. I mean, this is a reflection we don't always think about with civil society organizations, but do you believe more can be done when it comes to private-public partnerships too? I mean, just to sort of expand the whole range of what being a civil society is.
I think so, absolutely. I think that there has been and still exists, skepticism or caution to not work with private sector. In some cases, very valid concerns, obviously, because there are some problems there. But I think that there are many cases as well where business leaders really want to also make a positive impact, and I think we should try to collaborate with them. We have a project where we work on Sustainable Development Goals 16 plus, which is especially interesting for businesses. I mean, it's a broad SDG, as you know. It includes peace, inclusion, good governance, and so forth. But that one is really interesting also for businesses because it includes rule of law, and important factors there for businesses. And we've seen a lot of interest from the private sector to get engaged with the UN. The UN and the private sector, they speak different languages and often have trouble communicating in an effective way. And I think that's another area where youth come in, because as I mentioned, for instance, in the entrepreneurship program, young entrepreneurs especially are much more interested, not only to have a good business, obviously have profit, make money, but also that their businesses have a positive social impact. And they are very interested in global issues, the Sustainable Development Goals, how they can make their businesses have positive impact on the ground. So I think that that's also an opportunity for young people to get connected to global issues and the UN specifically.
Mariam, anything?
Yeah, I have a question when it comes to the challenges that so everyone talks about empowering youth and providing the platform for them, and you're obviously doing that through WFUNA. But my question is, what are some challenges you face in the process of empowering youth, and do you feel that that might be deterring other organizations from doing the same or following in the footsteps?
Difficult. I think that we, we discussed before, one of the biggest challenges is to have a good outreach and good funding to be able to reach young people, and not only young people who can afford to participate in global conferences or trainings or seminars, etc. And I think that what we saw before the pandemic and what we saw during the pandemic is that to be able to reach young people globally is of course possible in different ways. And I think Model UN is one of the areas where we've seen an incredible amount of energy and dynamism with youth participants. But in other cases, we see that it's very difficult to have, especially young people with dire economic circumstances, to participate. And I think that this is something where we try to collaborate, obviously, with our national UNAs who are actually on the ground in different countries. We see there's a lot of interest from young people, but also there are, as you know, many concerns. I mean, they have trouble finding work or getting the education that they want. There are so many other factors that are preventing them from sometimes participating in activities which they see as, this is the this is the extras that you do once you already have a good education, or you can find a job, or you can find a means of income. So I think that this is an important factor, because usually we only think of the young people that have the capacity and the possibility to participate. Many of them do not have internet, and we see that on the ground. Many of them cannot access or cannot afford to participate in the different programs. So I think funding and fundraising is very important. And this is something that we have been discussing with our donors, that we need to find a way to bring in youth that are representative of the entire youth population, not just a specific segment. This is not only related to young people, of course, but especially with young people now, and the dire economic situation and the worsened situation during the pandemic. I think this is an important thing. So we need to get as many youth as possible from different strata of society with us. So I think this is one of our biggest challenges.
No, very understandable. I mean, just coordinating so many organizations on the ground as well must be quite a challenging item. How do you overcome some of the cultural differences in understanding as well? Because that's another level onto it, not just, of course, the generational gaps and the technological differences, but also the cultural differences. We have the UN values, the UN charters, but of course that's understood differently from different country to country and people to people. So
yeah, that's an important point. And I mean, I think one thing that we've seen is, and it relates to the theme that you have here, you know, across borders, that Model UN has been a great way of creating these friendships, I would say. Even, I mean, it's not just cultural understanding or intercultural understanding, but also friendships. And I think this is very important. So when they can actually see each other, you know, in person, I think this is an important way of understanding each other. So I think the Model UNs that we've had, the Wymans, have been great for this, and this is the feedback that we get back. You know, they have met other young people from really across the globe with different values, sometimes different experiences, different understanding, and different opinions. I mean, it's inevitable, obviously, but I think that those personal interactions and the personal collaboration that they do during the Model UNs has been, I think, invaluable. We also have other specific programs that we do for specific regions that have very challenging circumstances. We've done together with some of our UNAs in Georgia, Armenia. We've done cross border trainings and intercultural understanding and focus on dialogue and partnership for youth from Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. As you know, it's a very tense region, as an example. Mm-hmm. And I think, again, when young people get to see each other, collaborate on a project or a program that is not specifically focusing on the conflicts that their governments see, I think that those bonds and those friendships really help them to overcome some of the prejudices and misunderstandings. So I think that we need to find different ways to do it. Model UN, I think, is a great way. Different types of other trainings and in-person meetings, focusing on a UN-related issue, not necessarily the conflict that is you know, permeating their societies, I think is very important. So this is some of the things that we do.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the SDGs, and obviously that's something that is very consistent to what we do. We also try and focus on sort of education and the partnerships. You also work quite a lot, I believe, on ensuring transparency with civil society organizations monitoring the SDGs. I mean, are you confident with our state of play with the SDGs, or do you think more can be done? And what is it that you want to see done to make sure we sort of reach these goals together?
Yeah, I mean, many of the SDGs are in a worse state now than they were 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, unfortunately. So, I mean, obviously a lot can be done. And I think that this will require a real concerted effort, and member states really need to understand that this cannot happen unless obviously there's substantial political will that then comes also with funding and engagement and inclusion. I think that's one of the reasons why we've worked with SDG 16, is that SDG 16 includes a component of inclusion. You need to include all the stakeholders from the development of the policies all the way through implementation. And this is something that's a big problem, even for very wealthy and developed countries. So I think that in order to really be able to achieve all the goals of the SDGs, we need to bring in all the stakeholders, and that's why young people are key, and so are all the other stakeholders as well. We talked earlier about the private sector. We need to talk about the marginalized groups. We see a lot of problems now for indigenous populations. We see that during the pandemic, there has been an increase in most countries of gender-based violence. So I think that we need to look at all of these things and see how we can reverse some of those trends. And I think that's why, you know, this phrase "building back better" has come, because what was happening before the pandemic was certainly not enough. But I think what the pandemic has shown us is that we need to think differently. And one of those things is inclusion of all these different groups, including youth. So I think that's really required, and it's not there's not a lot of years left now until until 2030. So we really need to accelerate these things.
I fully agree. Right. Oh, okay. Thank you. So I want to focus a bit on you now, obviously, as someone with a lot of experience in civil society organizations. What is something that you have done leading these organizations that you believe has helped to prioritize diversity and inclusion? I mean, obviously, that is part of the role of WFUNA, bringing all of them together. But what is something that sort of each of us can do to make sure we are making sure that the teams we create are as diverse and as inclusive as possible?
That's a difficult question, but I think one of the things that I think is important, especially for organizations like ours, I mean, we are a federation of, independent national UN associations, and that include many other stakeholders. Many UN associations also have, they have individual members, they have organizational members. So it's a very broad set of stakeholders. And I think one thing that has been very important for us, I think, is to, one, build up the capacity of our national UN associations and our youth members. And that's why we focus so much on Model UN and trainings and capacity building sessions, because we need to have the skills and the competence and the quality of work spread throughout the organization, especially on the ground. So I think that has required us to look how we can partner up with other stakeholders and partners, from member states to private sector to foundations to other NGOs that are working on similar issues, to find like-minded partners. So I think these partnerships are key for us, and I think they have been key and are key for many of our most active and well-functioning UN associations. So I think that is one thing that we have been focusing on, to try to find that. And also since we are a federation, we very much encourage our national UNAs and youth associations to work with each other, with us and each other. So there are lots of bilateral projects and bilateral partnerships. So I think partnerships has really been key, and what we can offer and some of our stronger UNAs can offer is training, capacity building, and occasionally, when we succeed, joint funding, which is of course necessary. So I think those partnerships and inclusion of more stakeholders, I think, has been really important for us.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we're very happy to be working with you for World Model UN Day as well, with activities. And we're very much looking forward to Bill Yotov joining us tomorrow too, with his talk as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that this is a great idea, World Model UN Day. It's such an important factor. And I think that when we discuss this Model UN concept with member states, I mean, everyone is very positive, and everyone, many of them have experiences and recollections from when they participated themselves in this. So I think, it's very natural. And I think with the focus now on our common future and the future of the UN and how people want to see the UN, I think World Model UN Day would be a natural conclusion. And it's great work that you've been doing. We're happy to be part of it and supporting it, and we very much look forward to having it established.
Thank you. May I quickly ask, have you ever participated as a delegate in an MUN?
I did many kilos ago when I was young. I did participate, yes. And of course, now as an older person, I participated as an observer in many of our own model UNs. And when I worked for UNA Sweden, we started a model UNs and participated in a number of them. So, and collaborated with other partners. So I think that, yes, and I've had great experiences myself personally as well.
Excellent. Well, I want one final question, which is something that I like asking all the interviews I do, which is a positive one, because we talk a lot about, obviously, the effects that COVID has had on both youth, on gender-based violence, but that is quite simply, you know, what are you positive for? What are you enthusiastic for? What do you look ahead to the future and are happy is happening?
I think that what COVID, for instance, has shown us is that there is an additional great pool of interested persons, people who have participated now only in our online programs that we had not seen before. Obviously, we had our offline programs, including the Model UN programs, and we want to resume them as much as possible. But what we have seen is that there are a lot of people who want to participate who do not necessarily have the possibility, either financially or practically, to come. But it shows that there is a very large pool of persons who really want to get engaged with the UN, who want to have, you know, a better world. And I think that one of the things that we see and I see, which is very personally rewarding, is that there is a lot. And I mean, the news, as you know, focuses only on the problems and the challenges. But what we can see on the ground, and when we collaborate with partners, there is so much positive energy. There's so much positivity in working and wanting to work for global issues and to improve the well-being of the world. That's really, really heartwarming. So I think that if you not only look at the challenges, which are important, and we all do, of course, all the different problems and challenges of the world, if you also combine that with looking at not only the opportunities, but the individuals and the stakeholders and the partners who are working so hard and are dedicated and are interested in this, if only given the opportunity and the resources and the training and the skills, I think is really amazing. And there are a fantastic number of projects and individuals and things happening, which is amazing, really.
Mr. Golmohammadi, thank you very much for joining us for this opening ceremony of World Model UN Day. It's been a pleasure to speak to you.
Likewise, thank you. And thank you so much for all your good work. It's really great to see, and we hope to be able to help as much as we can.
We're certain. We did a little study with Bill Yotiv recently and the other partners, and I think we managed to tally up 141 countries with MUN presences. There's no doubt we'll definitely be a lot more active and a lot more cooperative with everything we can do. So that does conclude, I think, our opening ceremony for World Model UN Day. Thank you very much for joining us, Secretary General of WFUNA. Make sure to check out all the rest of our panels after this from Ryan, and with all of our amazing partners, MUN Command, MUN Impact, YSB Best Delegate, NMUN, MyMUN, and of course WFUNA. Wishing everyone watching this a wonderful day. Wishing you, Mr. Golmohammadi, a wonderful day. And of course, Mariam, thank you very much, everyone, for listening, watching, and bonne continuation for World Model UN Day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.